I mean, Tom Slater, are we happy with that? Simple question.
Of course not. I mean, this is going to achieve precisely nothing. That's why it makes it seem almost pointless rather than even necessarily a bad idea.
What if it's scaled up, though? What if all 800 who turned up were sent back to France and we took another 800, quote, legitimate asylum seekers?
The idea that it's going to even exist beyond the 11 months that has been sketched out for it is not entirely clear. I mean, this was signed up to under Emmanuel Macron. French politics is as restive and all over the place.
I imagine the French people will be thrilled to have these people back as well.
Absolutely, and also a scheme that's obviously not really going to work. I mean, the whole theory here is that even you don't necessarily need to deport everyone who enters the country illegally, but enough of them so that it breaks the incentive, it makes the odds just a little bit more stacked against the person who's thinking about making that very perilous journey.
Well, when Australia did it, it was everyone.
But
everyone.
The Home Office is already briefing out. This is the Home Office officials. These are the mandarins. Story in the Times today saying that we reckon it needs to be at least 8 in 10 in order to properly break its business model. What we're talking about here is 1 in 14. So even on their own sums, on their own numbers, this doesn't add up.
Okay, but they're saying it's a pilot. They're saying it's a pilot scheme.
And do we really think that it's going to be expanded after that point? Do we really
well,
think
we're told if France agreed to it, we're told the EU has given the say-so. We know Friedrich Merz in Germany, I mean, he's cut his own migration since being... He's only been in office a couple of months, 50%. Because basically he said to the border guard, stop letting in, basically, young men who are turning up saying, oh, I'm an asylum seeker. Basically, on any spurious ground, just don't let them in the country. Problem solved. I mean, that's the thing, because the reason why people were travelling across Europe en masse, remember back 2015, was basically Angela Merkel said, oh, the doors are open. And the whole of Eastern Europe went, oh, gee, thanks, Angela, really appreciate that, as they had thousands upon thousands of people trekking through Europe. But we know 30 to 40% of everyone who arrives in Europe as a supposed asylum seeker, mostly, almost entirely economic migrants, plan to come to Britain.
No, absolutely. And there's just no seriousness about actually taking the steps that are necessary to even bring this down within the legal confines that we currently have.
But there isn't, because they don't genuinely think it's a problem.
No, exactly. I think
they think the borders should be... Vet Cooper believes in open borders.
The thing is, it's not to discredit the idea that we need to get out the ECHR, that we need to look again at our human rights legislation. I agree with all of that. The thing is, government still can act. You've seen that across Europe, where you've had centre-right, centre-left governments. Kind of doesn't matter. They've all recognised this as a problem. They need to get a grip on it. And even within their own legal confines have managed to find a way. The difference here is that this is a government run by human rights lawyers. Keir Starmer, human rights lawyers. Lord Hermer, human rights lawyer, who's asserted his right to essentially veto any legislation that he deems to be in contravention of international law. This is the problem. They're never going to be able to digest what is necessary in order to just start to carve out a reasonable policy. They don't believe it's a problem. I keep saying this. Honestly, I've spoken to these people. I've known these people for years. I've interviewed them for years. Well, they couldn't come on anymore. Not that I think it's a big loss. They don't say anything of any use anyway. But they genuinely don't think that either mass uncontrolled legal migration or illegal migration is an issue. They really don't think it's a problem. They believe in open borders, that we should be open to the world. Diversity is our strength. They genuinely believe that our colonial white history is a bad thing, and that we are a nation of immigrants. I mean, all complete nonsense, provable nonsense. But they do believe it. And yet it's something which I think shows that they just don't really think about this issue. They think and speak in platitudes about this particular issue. They act as if it was, 'twas ever thus, even though before 1999 we never had net migration over 100,000. I mean, it's one of those things where this is such a present era. There's and also I think one thing
is acting like this is the norm.
No, exactly. And so therefore why people are upset about it is because it's unprecedented in British history.
And not only do we not agree with it, you expressly asked us and we said no. At every election since you started doing it, we said no, and you carried on doing it.
The proportion of the population who are in support of the kind of numbers, net migration numbers that we're currently experiencing, it's in the single digits percentages. Like no one voted for this, no one wants this.
And people
to see
who
opinion really harden in a way that could actually be concerning.
And sort of long-time Labour voters, the people who Labour apparently like, because they don't want the bigots to vote for them, of course they don't. That's what they say, those aren't our people. But again, what they don't realise is it's people they're supposed to care about, work working people who are being hardest hit, particularly people on the lowest wages. You know, why is it you can't earn any decent money being a delivery rider when there's all that money being made by, you know, Uber Eats and delivery and everything? It's because they pay such low wages, because they know in the areas where this is like a massive thing, like big cities like London and Birmingham or whatever, they can get a whole load of illegal migrants to basically, you know, siphon off and subcontract the franchise and of doing the deliveries, and they'll do it for a pittance because they're working illegally. Illegal working and even legal migrant working, we know, brings down wages for Brits, and it brings down wages for not just your white indigenous Brits, it brings down wages for Afro-Caribbean Brits, you know, second, third generation from the Caribbean. It brings down wages for, you know, Asians, you know, second or third generation who've come here legitimately and built a life here, and who totally and utterly, you know, absolutely assimilated to this country. It brings down wages for everybody.
And it's one of those things where I think the politicians, if they weren't so slow on this, would start to recognise that the public are ahead of them on this issue. They have been for a very long time in terms of recognising what the problems are. Obviously, when you think about migration, there are forms of it which most people tend to support. The idea of actually joining a society because you want to buy into it, because you want to contribute. Those things are really uncontroversial. That's not what we've ended up with. With, again, illegal, not just cheap imported labour, but illegal imported labour in order to prop up the business model of some app which has made it easier for people to get pizza on a Friday night. This is not a positive success story.
Well, and the Office of Budget Responsibility making that point. Immigration is creating serious problems. They're the government's fiscal watchdog. I mean, these people, we've got a problem with the OBR already, is that they're pretty, you know, woke leaning.
Well, as soon as they came out and said this, it starts to make you think maybe they've got this wrong as well.
Yeah, there is that. Or maybe immigration isn't good. Yeah, exactly.
You know.
Immigration is creating serious problems for public services and living standards, they've pointed out. Labour must prioritise getting Britons back to work instead of relying on overseas workers to grow the economy. I mean, there you go. I mean, we can't deal with debt. We can't deal with any of the issues we've got. We don't get all that done. And any government that came in that said they were going to seriously get that done, I think would be a vote winner. You know, but you need to go full, you know, Javier, you know. Was it? No, what is his name? Malay. I think brain's gone. I think of Bolsaro for some reason in my head.
Javier's his first name, isn't it?
Yeah,
I think so. Yeah, you're half right.
I was almost there. That's why I have Tommy, because he knows his stuff. But this is the thing. You know, you need someone who's going to absolutely get to grips with it all. And if mass economic legal migration brought with it massive boost to the economy and riches for all, we would be sodding Singapore by now. And we would be Monaco by now. We'd be so rich. We've had 10+ million more people arrive in this country. How's that working out for everybody? You know,
I'm not an economist, but it's conceivable to me that there are situations in which a sensible managed migration system can be an economic boon, skills gaps and whatever.
Absolutely.
That's not what we've got here. We've had an economy which has been stuttering, flatlining, that never recovered from the 2008 financial crash, and then therefore to essentially paper over the cracks, you lean on cheap imported labour. It superficially makes GDP figures look okay, even though in terms of people's actually quality of life, it's actually on the down slope, and it covers up for the fact that, particularly over the course of the past 5 years, but it's been building for a longer time before that as well, whole swathes of the country, of the workforce, are now not working. They've just been put out to pasture, and this is another way of covering that up.
And there's no incentive to get these people back to work if you can always just import. People say, well, you know, especially in London, well, I'd much rather have, you know, me Eastern European, keen, you know, probably with a postgraduate degree, you know, perfect English often, you know, working as my local barista, than some sort of stroppy, spotty 18-year-old who doesn't want to be there. Well, tough. Because we have to find housing for the other person, and we've already got housing for the 18-year-old, and that's the reality. And we're going to, and there's going to have to be a kick up the backside, not just for young people who all think they're too anxious to go to work on a Monday morning. There's going to be a kick up the backside for them, and frankly, a kick up the backside for schools and for parents, because no. Not an option anymore. You can't be mollycoddling your kids. You're going to have to tell them. And also, we need to tell parents, part of your job is to bring up a contributing member of society. That is part of your job, and if you're not planning to do that job, then we've got a problem. We also need people to have more babies here, as opposed to importing them. Let's also talk about what we find out about different offenders. Suspects who've been arrested, suspects who've been charged, and indeed those who are already convicted. Because Keir Starmer, after being pressured, I think, really crucially by Nigel Farage, a former UK leader, in a press conference yesterday, who've accused the police of a cover-up over the identity of two men who've been arrested for the alleged rape of a 12-year-old girl in Nuneaton last month. Warwickshire police have been criticised for failing to disclose their immigration status, but it was found out and it's been published that the two men who've been accused, of course not yet brought to trial for that alleged crime, are boat people living, arrived on migrant boats and living in an asylum seeker hotel. Lots of pressure for there to be more information released. Keir Starmer, Yvette Cooper today as well, have both said that the police should be, authorities, everyone else should be as transparent as possible. Of course, this all came to the fore of Axel Rudiger Bada. It was a bit complicated by the fact that he was actually just under 18, and then the courts allowed us to name him. But the information that was given out, this sort of, Welsh choir boy, it didn't tally with the reality, and people knew they were being lied to, but that allowed an awful lot of complete lies on social media about him being an asylum seeker. He wasn't off the boats. He wasn't, he was born in Wales, but he was born to immigrant parents from a war-torn area. This was relevant information. I think a lot of people felt. We did have when we had in Liverpool a car which mowed people down. In that case, still going to trial, of course. So we need to be careful. The police very quickly said that the person who they had arrested was a white man born in Britain. And lots of us pointing out, well, hold on a minute, would you have said if it was an ethnic minority man, not born in Britain or born in Britain? And big question marks about that. But the fact that we're often not being given information about someone's immigration status, do we have a right to know that information? Is it relevant, Tom?
Well, I think it's becoming increasingly relevant in a social media age, in a time in which there is a hunger for information as soon as one of these horrendous attacks or crimes are committed. And I think the number one thing has to be consistency. You cannot have a situation in which a crime, if it's committed allegedly by a certain type of perpetrator, it seems to have been the case in Nuneaton, Afghan asylum seekers, that information cannot see the light of day. Whereas you have the alleged attack in Liverpool, the car attack, where that information comes out within hours. I think
minutes, actually.
This is one of those situations in which it makes people feel like they're really being gaslit and played, and also just projects such a low view of the public. We're not going to tell you information in this case because we're worried how you're going to react. We're going to tell you information very quickly in this case because we're worried about how you otherwise might react. Surely the question is to be both open, within reason for protecting
There'll be times
trials,
when you can't give the identity.
but consistent as well. And yes, there are going to be people who are not, unfortunately, trust is so broken down that maybe even that's not enough to make them believe
but the key thing is, the reason why they think there's going
help.
to be trouble if they give certain information is because they genuinely think they have utter contempt for the British public. I hold no candle for anyone who picked up a brick or threatened anybody in an asylum hotel or anything during the Southport riots last year. Absolutely disgusting behaviour. But I absolutely have sympathy for the mothers and many others who were standing outside peacefully asylum hotels and right now and saying no, we don't want these people here. But this is against the authorities. But all protest has to be peaceful. But I think one of the reasons why people's emotions are riled up, I'm not excusing people's behaviour if they turn to criminality, but one of the reasons why people are riled up is because they do feel they are being lied to. And you say gaslit, and there's only so many weeks, months and years that you can treat the British public as if they are mugs. The people will put up with it.
No, exactly. And the thing is, the truth always comes out shortly afterwards anyway. And there's nothing to be gained, I don't think, from the authorities from being cagey where this information is concerned. The fact that they have responded so differently in so many different cases indicates this isn't a question of where the law is. These are individual calculations being made by police forces because they're fearful of the public reaction at any one particular point.
And also we know that the tops of police forces are now so completely and utterly befuddled by wokeism. You can't be a police chief. You can't get up the ranks now unless you play along with the wokeism. And they are more concerned about community cohesion than they are about the truth. And I don't think that's a good place for us to be in. I really, really don't.